Actual bias is not easily quantified. Without a historical context, without legal context, it becomes confusing. And if you deny bias, then you reject not only your common sense, but the experiences of many people like myself.
Black people commit more crime per capita than other groups. And the natural response to that is a reflexive reaction which puts it back on the police.
It is the slave patrols from which our police force then is founded. 1865, the 13th Amendment abolishes slavery, but read your Constitution. Slavery is abolished except as punishment for a crime. The wardens then lease out the prison laborers, but then how do you get that labor? You create criminal laws that criminalize Black behavior.
Patterns of policing today do not demonstrate police bias. Contemporary policing is data-driven. In order to save lives, cops go where people are most being victimized, and that is in minority neighborhoods. According to the Justice Department, Blacks die of homicide at 6 times the rate of whites and Hispanics combined. That's because Blacks commit homicide at 8 times the rate of whites and Hispanics combined, according to the Justice Department.
In 2013, the federal court said policing in New York City is racially biased, as well as the Justice Department of the United States said there were small as well as large police departments across the country in a finding that policing is racially biased.
The judge in the Floyd case was removed from the case afterwards by the Second Circuit Court of Appeals for violating the appearance of impartiality.
You said Blacks commit more crimes. How are you defining crime? You've only focused on violent crimes, and that's a very small percentage of all crimes. In order for you to be a part of this database, that means that a police officer has to not only encounter you, but decide to arrest you. And what happens is whites commit more crimes, but they are not arrested in the proportion in which they should be arrested. There are interactions with police officers that take place on a myriad of occasions. But what we have at the same time is the police officer making a judgment call, because policing is very subjective.
I'm going to go out on a limb and estimate that 100% of homicides are reported. Okay, there isn't any disparity between the suburbs and the cities or farm communities about when people are getting murdered, they get reported. Violent crime is what matters, and violent crime, there are no reasonable policy debates or whether or not we should respond to armed robberies or whether there's a difference between homicide reporting and investigation in the suburbs or in the city. Okay, so those are the things that aren't subjective. They're 100% objective.
If we decided to do zero tolerance enforcement, and we decided to increase, as a law enforcement agency, increase our activity in this 10 square block area, this would be the most criminal area in New York within a short period of time. It's only certain crimes you look at to determine criminality. And people are very selective about what crimes they look at to determine who's more criminal, so to speak.
It's not just they're looking at the 7 serious violent felonies. Go to any police community meeting in a high crime area and you'll hear some version of the following requests. You arrest the drug dealers and they're back on the corner the next day. There's teens hanging out in the street fighting. Whatever happened to truancy and loitering laws? The irony is this: if the police respond to these heartfelt requests for public order, they'll generate the racially disproportionate enforcement activity that can be used against them, however falsely, in a racial profiling lawsuit.
It would seem logical that police action would be based on these actual complaints from the ministers and the community, et cetera. First off, if you've ever gone to these community meetings, there ain't a whole lot of people there. And if you collect data based on the decision that you made, the subjective decision that you made to look for it there, not based on community concerns, or some old lady said this, or some, person said that. It's not about that at all. But where you decided to consciously look for it and execute this new enforcement action, you're going to find crime there.
We have a shot spotter technology. This is something that transcends people reporting crime in New York. It's a machine that listens to shootings.
And it pinpoints where the shot came from.
The shots are happening in high crime areas. The police are trying to save lives.
You only getting shot. What's the name of this silly system? Shot spotter information from locations you put the shot spotter equipment in.
Students are leaving this area in the Upper East Side, rambunctious, loud, using new curse words. Yes, they're not seen as a threat, but then when you move it to Brooklyn, they are. When we talk about crime, no one's talking about that white serial killer. No one's talking about that white mass murderer.
It is the tragic case that if you're a black male in New York City, a law-abiding black male, which is the vast majority of black males, you stand a much greater chance of being stopped because at some point in your life you meet a suspect description than if you're a white male. Again, the facts are these according to victims and witnesses.
Black people commit a disproportionate number of violent crime, and that's as reported on the fly by victims.
Guess who inputs the data into the CompStat machines? Individuals who carry with them a certain bias, along with the systemic bias of the structure of policing.
Last year, over 4,300 people were shot in Chicago. Almost all the Chicago victims were black. If you believe the Black Lives Matter narrative, you'd assume that a significant portion of those victims had been shot by cops. In fact, the Chicago police shot 25 people last year, virtually all armed or dangerous. That's 0.6% of the total.
The other side has pointed to certain very specific areas in which there is a spike in black crime. But overall, whites in America commit more crimes because there are more white people in this country.